I think we're much better prepared for Fangorn and understanding Fangorn by our first taste of the Old Forest.
Oh, oh yeah. Okay. So see, there's nothing there because it really wasn't. So
I see what you did there,
it's
sir.
just a
I
black
see what you did.
screen. So for those of you listening, I just put up a black screen, not a video, because there's nothing there.
Jonathan's
So
being very clever, sir. So, and here we're getting into an issue that we'll have for the next number of changes, which is literally the change was they removed it.
yeah,
Now
right.
there's a slight exception for Old Man Willow, as we'll get into, but with regard to Tom Bombadil, with regard to the Barrow Downs, with regard to the Old Forest, and mostly with regard to Old Man Willow, they just aren't there. With regard to Goldberry, just not there. So we're going to approach this a little differently, or at least I am, which is that when we get to our questions about it, I'm going to try to give an analysis of, was it A, necessary for cinematic purposes, and B, was it, when I'm looking at whether it's lore friendly, I'm going to look at whether removal of that element um, handicaps your story from a lore perspective, because obviously by definition anytime you remove it, it's against the lore if you remove a chunk of the book. But I don't think that's fair for this kind of analysis. I think we want to look at something more deeply than just that, and so I'd like to look at the story and how each of those impacts the story.
Well, so what is the primary way that its removal then for you impacts the story? Just of the Old Forest part, not all the way up through Tom Bombadil and Old Man Willow, but just
Right.
what does that impact?
So for the Old Forest, I want to give a quote, and this is when the hobbits have first ventured into the Old Forest, and they're heading for Bonfire Glade, and they're first feeling the oppression of the forest. So I need to point out that for Tolkien, the forest is a living thing, and it's full of living things, and the things that are living, the trees especially, have a will that trees in our world do not. And so there's a great number of pages. Tolkien. It's interesting if you start analyzing how much time Tolkien spends giving different things, and you look at something like he spends about as much time describing the Old Forest as he does the entire fight with the Balrog and and everything in all the martial elements in Moria, which is quite a bit. So Tolkien, that tells me two things. One, he cares deeply about the atmosphere of his story, and he secondarily cares very deeply about trees. He was a great lover of trees, and we can see that, of course, from Fangorn and Treebeard and the Ents. But we see it first in the Old Forest. I'm going to read a passage quickly from that first, when the four hobbits are traveling through the forest. The ground was rising steadily, and as they went forward, it seemed that trees became taller, darker, and thicker. There was no sound except an occasional drip of moisture falling through the still leaves. For the moment, there was no whispering or movement among the branches, but they all got an uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched with disapproval, deepening to dislike and even enmity. The feeling steadily grew until they found themselves looking up quickly or glancing back over their shoulders as if they expected a sudden blow. There was not as yet any sign of a path, and the trees seemed constantly to bar their way. Pippin suddenly felt he could not bear it any longer, and without warning let out a shout. "Oi! Oi!" he cried. "I'm not going to do anything. Just let me pass through, will you?" The others halted, startled, but the cry fell as if muffled by a heavy curtain. There was no echo or answer, though the woods seemed to become more crowded and more watchful than before. "I should not shout if I were you," said Mary. "It does more harm than good." So what you have there is this atmospheric setting where Tolkien's introducing us to the concept of a deep forest, and a forest that's under no control by any civilization, and it's unfriendly. And as we go on, we find it gets more and more unfriendly. And there's another passage we're going to read a little later on about what Treebeard says, and Mary actually brings up the Old Forest, and Treebeard has a comment about that in the Two Towers. But for starters, let me say that when you take away the Old Forest and everything that happened in it, and I'm going to remove Omenwell and Bombadil from this because we're going to do separate ones on those, but just the Old Forest in general, we learn in this chapter that the Old Forest has enmity between it and the hobbits. Like, there was a great kind of battle at the edge of the old forest, which is in Buckland, and the hobbits of old burned vast amounts of the forest, and the forest remembers and hates them for it, and so is not friendly at all to these hobbits coming in. So this is no sort of Greenpeace-ish version of nature, where the Tolkien loves the forest. The forest is beautiful and has this life and dignity to it that he will not he will always reference. But it's not a safe place, and it's not. And he get his old forest chapter gives us introduction to that idea of dangerous trees, and I think we're much better prepared for Fangorn and understanding Fangorn by our first taste of it in the Old Forest. So, what do you think?
I think yes, I agree with all that, and I think what it also does is it's the first unsafe part of the Lord of the Rings. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
You're leaving the Shire, right? It's the edges of the Shire. This is the safe spot, and all. And as soon as they hit the hedge, right, the hedge that protects them against the trees that moved up because they were cutting and burning, uh, they all of a sudden this is now the dangerous world out around them. And so from Crick Hollow to this point, you are now set up to, okay, there's danger out here, and it's not just the Nazgul. There are other things that are creeping in, and I think that general sense. Uh, this chapter peaks that even more so even than the Nazgul do, because it's not just a character of a thing or an anthropomorphic thing. It's actually the trees, the land, right? It's moving, the sound, the enclosing, the claustrophobia that they feel. Anyway, so I think that sense of danger, which you pointed out, is when you lose that in here, you lose a large part of leaving the safety of the Shire, because you get from the Shire to Bree in the films, and it feels like no time has passed. And I think I saw that from Hobbiton to Bree, it's about 100 miles, and I think from Hobbiton to the Old Forest is going to be like 20 something miles. I
That
think
sounds
so.
right.
Um, so it's a large distance, and the other thing that you lose by removing this is they hit a point, like they don't know where they're going in a way, right? They get lost in the Old Forest, until they hit the Withywindle, and they kind of know where they are then at that point. But the sense of that travel and that it's still dangerous, like you lose so much of that, and that still bothers me so much in the films, is that it feels so short. And I know I've harped on this the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to harp on it again. That you lose that. But then also on the other side of that, you have the fearlessness of the hobbits still, right? They're willing to go through with it. They're not cowed by it, and they're not going to take the more dangerous road. They're going to they're not going to take the easy road. They're going to that might expose them to the Nazgul, but they're going to take the more dangerous road, and they're going to have the courage in order to go through that. Even though, and let me see if I can find the quote that I have. I don't know if I highlighted it, but let's see. It was Mary, where he just answers matter of factly about all that sort of stuff about that, and he answers like, "Oh yeah, about the Old Forest, yeah, everything is in it is very much more alive, more aware of what is going on, so to speak, than things in the Shire. The trees don't like strangers; they watch you. It's not like he's surprised by this. This is
This is
common
well
knowledge
known.
too.
Yep.
This is well known, right? Yeah, and occasionally the most unfriendly ones may drop a branch or stick a root out or grasp at you with a long trailer, but at night things can be most alarming, or so I'm told. I've only been once or twice after dark, and then only near the hedge. I thought all the trees were whispering to each other, passing news and plots in an unintelligible language, and the branches swayed and groped without any wind. So it's all accepted. Like the danger is there; they knew it, but the Shire was their safe. Where is that Shire for you in your life, Michael? The Shire. To go back to those interview questions that we heard from somebody.
20 years
Mhm.
later,
Yeah.
that the question never dies. Uh,
Uh, so
it,
yeah,
I love what you're saying there. And I like the fact that this is our first introduction to the land itself as dangerous, not just
yeah,
in the movie it's all driven by characters. It's the Nazgul that they're up against, and the Nazgul that they're fleeing from, and in the books there's so much more richness, both with regard to characters that are left out like Fatty Bulger and Farmer Maggot, but also the land itself, and we miss out or Gildor, Inglorian. Um, but the land itself has its own character, and
yeah,
even the trees are kind of like a
yeah,
personality in Tolkien's world.
yeah.
And he's really good at painting that picture and personalizing the forest in a way that we completely miss out on with regard to in the movies.
Yeah, and something we'll talk about more in the extended podcast is all the danger that Frodo and Sam experience in Middle Earth. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking through it. Comes from Saruman/Sauron, right? That's everything stems from that in the films. Whereas in the books, danger doesn't, like the Barrow Downs, right? That's not Saruman or Sauron. The old man Willow, that's neither one. Caradhras, that's neither one either. And so you lose a greater sense of the danger of the world all around them, and the safety that the Shire had for them.
Hmm.
So anyway,
I like
something,
that's. I think that's true. There's so many things that are dangerous and have personalities in Tolkien's world, and for the movie, when you slice and dice things down, you just lose some of that. So
yeah, you have to. All right, let's get to our questions then. First one, is it lore friendly?
so
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah,
yeah, I agree. It's not unfriendly.
yeah,
It's just you just miss a piece, but
yeah,
the way they portray it, it's not as if they have taken anything with the old forest and changed it into something
yeah,
it wasn't. Um, so it's almost a not applicable in this case, but sure,
yeah,
that's
yeah. I agree. There's not much more to say about it. It would be hard to make the case that it's changing something dramatically to be lore unfriendly. That you
right.
couldn't
Right, they
compare
would
it
have
to.
to take out again. My filter is: does its removal remove a crucial piece of the plot that ruins the story or makes the story lore unfriendly?
Yeah,
And the answer is no, it
yeah,
doesn't.
agreed. All right. So does the change make for better cinema? I kind of hate to say it, but yeah, the change does make for better cinema. This is always where, like, it's what I want, but I understand for the films they couldn't have them going through another forest. Now, I wish they would have added something back from to make it feel like a longer, that 100 miles between Hobbiton and Bree. They would have added something in there to make it
Hmm.
the sense of distance was there. Whether that was going to Crick Hollow, whether that was more time spent on the path and meeting multiple Nazgul, whether it was adding Farmer Magnet, something else. They could have added this. So I've said no before. Like I think there are other removals that are like Farmer Maggot. I think he would have been a great character, but I think there's enough here where you could say, yeah, they didn't really need this in the film.
Totally agree. Um, I focus on the word cinema. This is what this question is all about. Cinema is not literature. And so, from cinematic purposes, because you're trying to make a movie, it does make for better cinema because it would have made the movie unnecessarily long. If they
Yeah,
had chosen a different format and we had as we've oft discussed, the 10 episode seasons per book, that would be, then they wouldn't have had to do that. And so they could have got a lot of great mileage out of the Old Forest.
agreed. Agreed. All right. So how much do you like the change? What do you think, Michael?
Average is 3.0 on this. I Because it's better for cinema and because this is not an egregious change. It just lacks. You miss out on some of the atmospheric elements that we mentioned. I'm just going to go flat 3.0 on this. I don't have much of an opinion. It isn't like it's egregious to me, and it isn't like I like it. It's just
Yeah.
it's right down the middle.